Hello everyone and welcome to another Guild Wars 2 video. Today we're going to go over the Living World update of Entangled, which is the second episode of Season 2. As usual, I'm going to give a really quick summary of the story that happened during this update, and then go on to my feelings on it and possible theories going forward and so on and so forth. This update begins by receiving a letter from Bram, who talks about how something terrible has happened at Prosperity, and that's where Timey was left behind, so we better go check on the Pipsqueak. Once you arrive, you find that even though the town has been attacked and several of the townspeople killed, Timey is okay. After you drop the bombshell that you for some reason know that the jungle dragon's name is Mordremoth, which everyone is not happy about, a little earthquake happens and causes the bookshelf in the back of Scarlet's house to collapse, and the tunnel behind it is revealed. This tunnel leads down to a part of an abandoned mine shaft, which leads out further up into Drytop in the western half of it. There's some nice little papers and stuff pinned on the wall in this little instance to basically give backstory of like how Yakington was here in Drytop and wrote an explorer's guide for it. And basically philosophical teachings which led to the way she used the Molten Alliance and Toxic Alliance and the Aether Blades to get her goals accomplished. Anyways, after you finish this instance, you follow basically a breadcrumb trail that Scarlet left behind of broken steam creatures and Asuran, like things that look like they've fallen off Asuran machines and all sorts of random stuff that she's dropped as she apparently traveled where she's going. Once you follow this breadcrumb to its eventual end, you find Scarlet's breakthrough, which is a giant tunnel with ley lines going through it. Now, the only reason these ley lines are actually visible is the fact that Scarlet had set up a bunch of mecha-magical devices all around the cavern, which make it to where it brings the ley lines into an actual visible spectrum instead of it just being an invisible flow of magic. The Inquest are also within the tunnels and have found all the ley lines, and of course, their Inquests, they want access to them, so they're trying to set up base here. So the first objective when you reach here is to clear the whole cave complex of the Inquest, which you do by Timey does by reactivating all of Scarlet's defenses that were there, and you use them on the Inquest. Which starts off as just a laser cannons, and then you control a steam creature, with finally using a holographic defense network to completely eradicate everyone in the caves except for you and the crew. Once the cave is cleared of Inquest, you meet up with the group and basically tell Timey how awesome she was and all of that, and you also discuss what to do next. Timey points out that the plant dragon's corruption has found some way to enter the cavern, which it doesn't show inside of the instance, but it shows outside because of Mordremoth events. And that it's also apparently following the waypoint signatures, which she said she's going to find a solution to. She's going to try to find a solution to make waypoints not attractive to Mordremoth. Anyways, she talks about how it's much more widespread than she ever thought could be, and that the waypoints at Fort Concordia and Fort Salma are acting irregularly. Marjorie and Casimir decide to go to Fort Salma to investigate, while you, Rox, and Bram go to Concordia. Timey elects to stay behind to try and learn more about Scarlet, and also to learn more about how the dragon's corruption's affecting the waypoints and using the ley lines and so on and so forth. You arrive at Concordia in the midst of an attack by the Mordrem on the Pact outpost. Eventually, you're able to defeat the Mordrem, and all of the Pact personnel move north to an Asuran lab for safety. You go and find another part of a Priory caravan and meet them there, and fight off the Mordrem that also attack the Asuran lab and try to kill everyone there. During this mission, it's told that the waypoint began acting irregularly around the time that a Priory caravan arrived that was carrying many magical artifacts, and that's talking to some of the Priory caravan leaders. Several of these magical artifacts seem to have completely lost their magical power. One specific artifact which is mentioned is the Crichton Royal Locket. This locket is said to always have an image of the current heir of the Crichton throne inside of it. And while it was drained of some of its magic during the Mordrem attacks, it still did maintain its magical signature and should maintain its original purpose. Rox and Bram volunteer to stay behind with the pack to make sure that they're safe and look for more survivors, and you go on to meet Casimir and Marjorie at Fort Salma. When you arrive at Fort Salma, it is also in the middle of a siege by the Mordrem, but it's further along than the Concordia incident was. When you arrive, you kill some of the Mordrem which are outside, and by Belinda, which is Marjorie's sister's orders, you go and save some of her seraph which are outside, and go inside the gate with them. Once you're inside the fort, the town might look a little bit different, as it's a giant pit in the ground now, which has green corruption coming out of it. You meet Casimir and Marjorie right on the edge of this and go around basically fighting your way, once again from Belinda telling you so, to the eastern side of the fort to basically you get on an arrow card on the eastern side of the fort to kill all of the Mordremoth which are attacking the eastern town gate. Once the besiegers are dead, a giant Mordremoth thrasher appears on the outside of the eastern side of town, and you have to jump out there with Casimir and Marjorie's help to defeat it. The basic strategy with the thrasher is that he has a shield on him which makes him immune to attack. He'll randomly spin and do a giant AoEs all over the place that are not very hard to avoid, but which can hurt you and poison you if they hit. To knock down his shields, Marjorie summons bone minions, which will always spawn with a Mordremoth wolf on them, which must be killed and keep the bone minion alive. When these bone minions reach the thrasher, they explode, causing his shield to go down for a little bit, enabling you to damage it. The fight's not very hard, it just can be kind of annoying to continuously do this over and over unless you're in a group, especially if you're trying to go for the achievements such as keeping all of the bone minions alive without any of them dying, or even if you are able to do that, scrambling to get to them without getting hit by at least one of the poison shots. Eventually you succeed in killing the Thrasher, and all of the Mordremoth around retreat from the town, and you go back inside with Casimir and Marjorie to meet with Belinda. When you reach the area that you were going to regroup with her, you find this. Rest in peace, Belinda, we hardly knew you, and that's not an understatement. Belinda's death hits Marjorie, of course, very hard, as it is her sister, and she cares very much about that sister, of course. Marjorie decides that she's going to take Belinda back to Divinity's Reach to basically have a funeral and tell the family, especially her mother, about what happened. Casimir volunteers to go, but Marjorie basically sends her away, as in sends her to go help the group because they will need her help, while she goes back to her hometown on her own. Casimir reluctantly agrees to the demand and suggests that we should probably meet back up with the group in Dry Top in the middle of the ley line chamber. When you're back in the ley line chamber, you find Timmy and the group in a giant circular room on the western end of the tunnel. Inside of this room is a machine which very much looks like an Asuran-made machine, as it's got a bunch of cubes in it, and Asurans seem to be obsessed with cubes. See into the Eternal Alchemy originally, but it seems to have been modified by her slightly. Timmy also states her theory that the vines, which are spreading all over Tyria and attacking, basically draining magic from the waypoints, are not only the corruption of Mordremoth, but they are Mordremoth himself spreading tendrils out. Which, if you think about it, means that there's an elder dragon way over in the Maguuman Jungle somewhere, we're not even sure exactly where, which is spread all the way across the continent of Tyria just to follow ley lines and tap into the waypoint magic. That is an extremely long reach, and that is not good for Tyria as a whole. Timmy then goes on to nerd out about how Omad's machine is here and how it enabled them to see the Eternal Alchemy and what all you could learn from it, as the group tells her it's probably dangerous and should be destroyed. She then, of course, decides to run into the machine on her own and power it on, which you, the player character, then must run into the machine and try to pull Timmy out of it, leaving you inside the machine when it activates. Once it activates, you see this cutscene in the background, that's going on in the background right now, which is probably the main lore point of this whole update. It's the thing that gets the most theories going because of this. During this cutscene, you can actually hear dialogue in the background, which is actually from the short story where Scarlet, Ciara, because she hadn't turned into Scarlet yet, is talking with the pale tree during this whole vision. At the end of the cutscene, the group basically has dragged you out of the machine because you started screaming, and you tell them what you saw, basically saying that you saw a dragon and that you're somehow tied up with it and the fate of Tyria. And as the pale tree was a central symbol during this whole cutscene, Casimir decides that it'd probably be best to try and organize an audience with her, which, considering now it's Sylvaria, you think would be a lot easier, but for lore's sake, we have to make an audience with her through Casimir. Casimir tells you she'll send you a letter in the mail when she's able to organize an audience with the Pale Tree, and says she's going to go to Divinity's Reach to check on Jory. With that, the episode 2 of the Living Story Season World 2 is complete. So now on to the fun part, the theorizing. One nice little small theory, compared to at least the other ones from this patch, is that when you come out of the first tunnel out of Scarlet's house, you come across a friendly camp of centaurs, which is, I think, the first real camp of those in the game. These centaur all seem to follow a doctrine that's basically the same as Ventari's teaching. So you found a tribe which follows Ventari's teaching, even though they recognize it as being an older teaching than Ventari himself. This means that it's most likely that Ventari did come from this tribe, which is, of course, in the Maguuman Jungle, which we know he came from that. Well, we know Ronan came over here to get the seed for the pale tree, and it can probably be assumed that Ventari came from this direction as well. Another fun theory. So, Casimir points out that Aaron talked about killing a leader of Tyria, which Aaron very faintly mentioned cut off the head and the rest will fall, so I guess that was directly targeted at killing a leader of Tyria. Anyways, that's basically confirmed by what Casimir is saying, and she worries about which one would it be. I don't know which one it would happen to. Later on in the story, we come across a random royal artifact, which has never been mentioned before, which is a locket which shows the current heir to the Crichton throne. Now, why would you need this locket unless something were to happen to, I don't know, the current Crichton queen, such as Queen Jenna? So that's a very strong hint that something really, really bad could happen to the current queen of Kryta, and we might have to use this magical artifact to try and find the next descendant, who, by the way, has the blood of Doric in them, which can unlock the Bloodstones, which is also in the Maguuman Jungle, which is where we're going towards. I'm not going to get too much into the Bloodstone topic. There are people who have covered it far better than I ever could, such as Wooden Potatoes and, once again, supporting the small guy there. But I cannot go into the Bloodstone topic near as well as they have. I suggest you check it out if you want to know how that ties in. Basically, that symbol of the Eternal Alchemy can be found on a Bloodstone from Guild Wars 1. And the way that magic works and, the way a lot of magic's stored away in these Bloodstones. And obviously the Elder Dragons want to get into these Bloodstones. And it was sealed with King Doric's blood, which is in the bloodline of the Crichton royal family. Anyways, on to the biggin of this patch, I would say. So remember that cutscene that was 40, 45 seconds long, which is not that long for how big it actually is, where you, the player character, saw into the Eternal Alchemy like Scarlet saw, probably a recording of it considering you heard Scarlet's voice. Well, the first part just shows the pale tree and how once she went past the pale tree, she was able to see the Eternal Alchemy, which was represented, at least in this vision, as a big orb in the middle with 6 orbs around it. These orbs started rotating, and all these orbs were different colors as well, and started rotating around this orb in the center until one fell into the orb in the center. This caused a giant green glow to go out from it, and you could hear a dragon's growl in the background, as well as it looking kind of like an eye, although it's very abstract. It's very heavily implied it's an eye. It's like you look into the abyss and the abyss looks back kind of thing. Now, these theories flying everywhere about this, such as the gods, the human gods representing all the orbs, in the middle is Tyria, the elder dragons being the orbs, the realm of torment is what it's actually referring to. There are references everywhere. The way the story journal and the way your character interprets it is that these orbs are the elder dragons. And it actually follows, if you watch the color of the orbs, the order in which they start turning around the center orb is actually a very possible order in which the elder dragons awoke. We obviously don't know when the deep sea dragon woke up, but the rest of them follow in a pretty good line. The only confusing thing here is basically trying to discern which orb will be Zhaitan and which orb will be Mordremoth. But going by the awakening order, the orb which actually falls into the center would be Zhaitan's orb, even though it's kind of hard to tell, and yes, it is greener, but a lot of Mordremoth's things seem to have the black to it, like poison. Either way, it's once this thing falls into the center that a bunch of green spreads all everywhere, and you hear the growl. There's some fun theories about this as well, such as that now Zhaitan is dead. He is the dragon of death and decay, right? Well, what is Mordremoth? Mordremoth is the dragon of growth and life, like the primal kind of life that kills everything else kind of life. Well, those are polar opposites, such as how Primordus is a polar opposite to Jormag, and Kralkatorrik, I guess, is an opposite to the Deep Sea Dragon, although that one's kind of loose. But either way, Zhaitan and Mordremoth are very clearly opposites, and that means it was kind of like a balance. Now Zhaitan's dead, the balance has been thrown out, and Mordremoth is spreading like wildfire everywhere. And this could be what the vision's representing, showing that once the Zhaitan's orb fell in the middle, meaning his magic is released back into Tyria and he's gone, that Mordremoth takes over and is basically the prime power in Tyria right now. This theory is the one that makes the most sense to me personally, but there could be several other interpretations you go with this. If you want to go back and see who was right, I'm sure you can look on the Living World forums under the Entangled forum. There's all sorts of theories flying around there. I think that's all I'm going to go over theory-wise for this patch, so now I'm going to move on to my feelings and conclusions on this. I enjoyed this patch a lot, and I've enjoyed the last patch a lot. I'm in the crowd that does like the way this current living story is going. I like the writing a lot better than Season 1, and it feels like the group of characters is melding together a lot better than they were before. The Elder Dragon of this patch feels actually like a force of nature. It feels force of nature pun. It feels like something that's really powerful. Zaitan, while it was powerful, it seemed he himself was not. It was just he was able to raise a bunch of undead, and there were undead everywhere. Mordremoth, his minions they hurt and they're annoying, but he himself is spread across Tyria, and his minions are coming straight from that. That seems much more threatening to me. It's along the level of how Kralkatorrik just flew over an area and left a branded area full of his minions just by flying over. Like, this is big corruption and big power spreading everywhere. I like the fact that the scale of the Elder Dragon is staying like that. It needs to be big. It needs to be something that looks insurmountable almost. Because that's what they are. It's how do you fight a hurricane? How do you fight a tornado? Belinda's death. I didn't like the character of Belinda very much. I kind of liked her, but we knew nothing about her. It was very obvious she was probably going to end up dead in this patch. And really, she's just there for a character development for Marjorie is all she's there for. This gives us a way to get introduced to Marjorie's family, which I'm sure will happen now. And it makes her character darker, I'm sure, because she's going to be depressed about it. Belinda herself, while not very memorable, will probably have pretty big impact on the memorable characters of this story. So overall, I did enjoy this patch a lot. We got a new area to explore, although I don't like this area of Dry Top as much as the other area, but that's personal preference. And we also got more, a couple hours of story again, which all fine by me. Also, the next patch, because I did this video late enough I was able to see the trailer before this, the next patch looks freaking awesome and implies that we're going to have something along the lines of trying to cleanse Ascalon, which comes way out of right field there, but that's still amazing, and I'm looking forward to this next patch now a lot. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope that it helped any of you who missed it or are trying to decide if you want to purchase this living story with gems in the future. And I hope it helped you understand some of the theories and all the fun stuff there. If I left something out or you want to correct something I did, make sure to leave it in the comment section. And I'll see you all next time. We have some breaking news right here. We have discovered the reason for the Fort Salma attack. It was in fact not anything to do with magic, but was in fact to do with players who were watering the vines. These players will be tracked down and they will be apprehended.